I didn't just say no. I said it with a mouthful of cheap diner burger and a look that suggested he was the most boring thing I'd seen all week. Imagine the scene. 1,000 elite wolves in silk and suits, holding their breath while their divine alpha king, a man who smells like a thunderstorm and looks like a fallen god, claims a grease monkey like me in front of the world's cameras. He expected a bow. He expected me to swoon because my biology is supposed to override my brain. Instead, I gave him a middle finger and a cloud of exhaust. Now, the king is off his throne, and he's not coming for a kiss. He's coming to show me that in this city, you don't run from the apex predator. You just die tired.
Welcome back to Z's Romance, your home for the greediest high-stakes shifter stories. Before we dive into the heart of tonight's hunt, I want to hear from you. Our pack is growing every day, and I love seeing how far this community reaches. Head down to the comments right now and let me know, where in the world are you listening from tonight? Now, let's get back to the story.
Chapter 1. The Grease and the Gold. The wrench in my back pocket was the only thing keeping me grounded as I navigated the sea of silk and arrogance. I smelled like 10W40 motor oil and stubbornness, a stark contrast to the cloying, expensive perfumes of the debutantes lining the ballroom. I wasn't supposed to be here. I was supposed to be at my shop, finishing the clutch on a '69 chopper. But my client, a high-ranking beta with more money than sense, insisted I deliver his vintage Indian Scout to the gala's entrance personally, or he'd withhold the final $3,000. I just wanted my check. I didn't want the mating ceremony. The ballroom was a masterpiece of architectural vanity, soaring marble columns and crystal chandeliers that didn't need magic to dazzle, just a massive electric bill. In the center of the room stood Cole Vane, the Alpha King. He didn't need a crown. His presence was a physical weight that pressed against your lungs. He was 6'5" of broad-shouldered, suit-clad menace, his dark hair pushed back from a face that looked like it had been carved out of granite by someone who hated peace. The mating ceremony was supposed to be a curated event. He was meant to pick one of the 3 high-line females shivering in the front row. They were polished, perfect, and desperate. I was leaning against a marble pillar near the service exit, checking my watch and wondering if I could slip out without being noticed. Then, the air in the room changed. It didn't glow. It didn't hum. It just thickened. Cole Vane stopped mid-sentence. His head snapped toward the back of the room. His nostrils flared, taking in a scent that clearly wasn't lavender or rosewater. His eyes, a piercing, predatory gray, cut through the crowd like a blade through paper. They landed on me. "You," he said. His voice wasn't a roar. It was a low, vibrational frequency that made the marrow in my bones ache. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. I looked behind me, hoping there was a beautiful duchess hiding in the shadows. There wasn't. Just me, my dirt-smudged forehead, and my work boots. Cole began to walk. Every step was deliberate, the movement of a wolf who knew nothing in this city could stop him. The silence was so heavy, I could hear the ticking of the grandfather clock across the hall. He stopped 3 feet from me. Up close, he was terrifying. He smelled like ozone and damp earth, the raw biological scent of an apex shifter who hadn't shifted in weeks. "I have spent 10 years looking for a scent that didn't bore me," he murmured, his eyes scanning my face with an intensity that felt like a physical touch. He reached out, his large hand hovering near my jaw. "The search is over. You are coming with me." I felt the pull. My inner wolf, the one I usually kept locked in a basement in the back of my mind, whined in recognition. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs. It would have been so easy to lean in, to let the Alpha King take the lead. But I don't take leads. I took a slow, deliberate bite of the slider I'd snagged from a passing tray earlier, chewed it thoroughly, and looked him up and down. "You've got a little something," I said, pointing at his pristine lapel. He frowned, looking down. "Oh, wait, that's just your ego," I finished. I leaned in close, so only he could hear me, ignoring the way my skin buzzed at the proximity. "I don't care who your father was or how many packs you run, Cole. I'm a mechanic. I fix broken things. And you? You look like a project I don't have the parts for. I don't want you. Not today, not when the moon is full, not ever." I turned my back on him. I didn't walk. I marched toward the exit. The gasps from the audience sounded like a collective heart attack. I felt his gaze burning a hole in my shoulder blades, a physical heat that made the hair on my arms stand up. I reached the heavy oak doors, pushed them open, and ran for my bike. I kicked the engine over, the roar of the dual exhaust echoing through the silent, shocked courtyard. I didn't look back. I pinned the throttle, weaving through the city traffic like a maniac. I made it to my shop in record time, my heart still trying to exit my chest. I slammed the steel shutters down and threw the deadbolts. I breathed out, leaning my head against the cold metal. "He's just a man," I whispered to the dark garage. "Just a very big, powerful man." Then I smelled it. Ozone and damp earth. I turned around. Cole Vane wasn't in the room, but a single heavy black envelope lay on my workbench, pinned down by a heavy gold coin. I picked it up, my fingers trembling just enough to hate myself. The note inside didn't say, "I love you." It didn't say, "Please come back." It said, 10 minutes of a head start wasn't enough, Beatrice. I can hear your heart beating from the street. Open the door or I'll take it off the hinges." A heavy thud echoed against the steel shutter. Once, twice, and then the sound of metal groaning under impossible pressure. Chapter 2. The sound of steel. The screech of metal on metal was a physical assault on my ears. I've spent my life working with machines. I know what it sounds like when steel gives way. But this wasn't the clean snap of a bolt or the grind of a failing gear. This was the sound of a predator peeling back the lid of a tin can to get to the meat inside. "Cole, stop!" I yelled, my voice echoing off the concrete walls of the garage. The groaning stopped instantly. The silence that followed was worse. It was thick, predatory, and smelled entirely of him. I gripped the heavy pipe wrench in my right hand, my knuckles white. My heart was a frantic bird trapped in my ribcage, but I refused to let my hands shake. I am a Vance. We don't shake, and we definitely don't hide. "The door is rated for 3,000 pounds of pressure, you lunatic," I snapped, trying to find my bravado in the shadows of the shop. "You're going to ruin the alignment." "Then open it, Beatrice." His voice came through the steel, muffled but vibrating through the very floor beneath my boots. "I'm not here to talk through a wall, and I'm certainly not here to wait." "Then you're going to be disappointed," I said, stepping back into the center of the shop where I had more room to move. "Because that door stays shut. Go back to your palace and pick a girl who actually wants to wear a leash." There was a low, rumbling sound, a growl that wasn't human. It was a sound that triggered every survival instinct I had, a primal warning that a monster was at the gate. Then, the sound of the locks clicking. Not because he had a key, but because he was literally vibrating the tumblers with his bare hands, sensing the mechanics of the lock through the metal. It was a terrifying display of shifter sensory control. The heavy shutter began to slide up, slowly, deliberately. The moonlight spilled into the shop first, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. Then came his boots, expensive, hand-stitched leather. Then the tailored trousers. And finally, Cole Vane stood there, framed by the neon glow of the open sign across the street. He looked out of place among the oil pans and tire racks, yet he commanded the space like he owned every molecule of oxygen in it. He didn't rush me. He stepped inside, the door sliding shut behind him, with a finality that made my stomach drop. He let his gaze wander over the shop, taking in the disassembled engines and the grease on my cheeks. "You live like a rogue," he murmured, his gray eyes finally settling on mine. "Hidden in the dark, surrounded by iron? Why?" "Because iron doesn't lie to me," I retorted, keeping the wrench raised. "And it doesn't try to claim me because of some outdated biological fluke. Get out, Cole." "I mean it." He took a step forward. I didn't move. He took another, closing the gap until the heat radiating from his body was a physical force. He was so much larger than me, a mountain of muscle wrapped in a three-piece suit. But he didn't look down at me with condescension. He looked at me with a hunger that made my blood run hot. "It wasn't a fluke," he said, his voice dropping to a silk and gravel whisper. He reached out, not for my throat, but for the wrench. His fingers brushed mine, and a jolt of pure, unadulterated electricity shot up my arm. My breath hitched. For a second, the garage vanished, and all I could feel was the magnetic pull of him. He gently pried the wrench from my hand and set it on the workbench without breaking eye contact. "I'm not here to put you in a cage, Beatrice. I'm here because since I saw you, I can't breathe." I found my voice, though it was breathier than I liked. "Then buy an inhaler. You're leaving." I turned to walk away, to put distance between us, but his hand shot out, catching my wrist. He didn't squeeze, but the grip was absolute. He pulled me back, spinning me until my back hit the cold brick wall and his chest was inches from mine. He leaned in, his nose brushing against the pulse point in my neck. "You smell like rebellion," he whispered, his breath hot against my skin. "And it's the most intoxicating thing I've ever tasted." My heart did a traitorous flip. And my hands came up to push him away, but they ended up resting on his firm chest instead. I could feel his heart. It was racing just as fast as mine. "Cole," I started, but the words died in my throat as he tilted his head, his eyes darkening to the color of a stormy sea. Suddenly, the shop phone rang. It was the loud, jarring bell of an old landline. It shattered the tension like a hammer to glass. Cole stiffened, his head snapping toward the office. "Don't answer that," he commanded. "It's my shop." "I answer the phone," I snapped, slipping under his arm. I ran to the desk and snatched up the receiver. "Vance Repairs." There was a moment of heavy breathing on the other end, then a voice that made my skin crawl. "The king is in your shop, isn't he, Beatrice? Tell him the Iron Pack doesn't like being ignored. We're at your back door. And we brought more than just words." A heavy crash erupted from the rear of the building as the service door was ripped off its hinges. Chapter 3. The Uninvited. I didn't even have time to hang up the phone. The back of the shop, my sanctuary, was suddenly crawling with shadows. These weren't the polished suit-wearing wolves of the king's court. These were the dregs, the Iron Pack. They smelled like wet fur, cheap copper, and bad intentions. "Stay behind me," Cole growled. The transformation wasn't magical, it was biological. His frame seemed to expand, his muscles coiling like high-tension springs beneath his suit. His canine teeth elongated just enough to be visible, and his fingernails sharpened into lethal points. "Not a chance," I hissed, reaching under the desk and pulling out a heavy-duty, industrial-grade CO2 fire extinguisher. My shop. My fight. 3 wolves stepped into the light. They were big, scarred, and looked like they'd spent the last decade fighting for scraps in the city's industrial district. The leader, a man with a jagged scar across his throat, sneered at Cole. "The king has gone soft," the scarred wolf rasped, chasing a human-smelling stray in a dark alley. "The council won't like this, Vane." "The council isn't here," Cole replied, his voice a low, terrifying rumble that seemed to come from his chest. "And you won't live long enough to file a report." The leader lunged. He was fast, but Cole was a blur. There were no flashes of light, just the wet thud of fist meeting bone. Cole caught the wolf midair and slammed him into a stack of tires with enough force to shake the building. The other 2 moved for me. I didn't wait for them to reach me. I pulled the pin on the extinguisher and squeezed the handle. A massive cloud of freezing white CO2 erupted, blinding the first wolf. As he stumbled, coughing and disoriented, I swung the heavy canister like a mace. It connected with his ribs with a satisfying crack. "Stray, huh?" I yelled over the chaos. "I'll show you, Stray." The third wolf was smarter. He dodged the spray and circled around a disassembled engine block, his eyes fixed on my throat. I backed up, my heels hitting the edge of the bike lift. I was trapped. He crouched, his muscles tensing for the kill. Suddenly, a black blur intercepted him. Cole didn't even use his hands. He tackled the wolf with his entire body weight, sending them both crashing through a glass partition into the office. "Beatrice, get to the bike!" Cole shouted over the sound of breaking glass. "Cole, I'm not leaving you!" I yelled back, grabbing a heavy chain from the hoist. "Go!" he roared, his voice cracking with the strain of holding back his full shift. "More are coming. I can smell them. A whole damn convoy." I looked at the back door. He was right. The sound of heavy engines was approaching, the unmistakable rumble of pack trucks. If I stayed, we'd both be pinned down. If I left, I could draw them away. I'm faster on 2 wheels than any truck in this city. I dived for my Indian Scout, the engine still warm from my earlier run. I kicked it over, the roar of the exhaust drowning out the sounds of the struggle in the office. I looked back one last time. Cole was standing amidst the wreckage of my office, holding 2 wolves by their throats, his eyes glowing with a raw, predatory fire that had nothing to do with magic and everything to do with a king protecting his mate. 10 minutes, I yelled at him. "I'll be at the shipyard. Don't you dare die in my shop, Cole Vane." I pinned the throttle and roared out of the garage, the tires screaming as I hit the asphalt. In my rearview mirror, I saw Cole leap through the shattered front window, landing on the hood of the lead iron pack truck like a vengeful god. He wasn't just hunting me anymore. He was clearing a path. I tore through the city, the wind whipping my hair. I headed for the docks, the one place where the maze of shipping containers would give me the advantage. But as I glanced in my mirror, I realized the iron pack wasn't following me. Only one set of headlights was behind me, a sleek, black SUV that moved with terrifying precision. Cole? I took a sharp turn into the shipyard, weaving between the towering steel crates. I killed the lights and drifted to a stop behind a rusted red container. I waited, my breath coming in short, jagged gasps. The SUV purred to a halt 20 yards away. The door opened. Cole stepped out, his suit coat gone, his white shirt torn and stained with blood that wasn't his. He didn't look for me. He just stood there in the rain, his head tilted back. "I can hear your heart, Beatrice," he called out into the darkness. "It's singing for me." My heart gave a traitorous throb. I stepped out from behind the container, the rain soaking through my coveralls in seconds. "You're a mess," I said, my voice shaking. He turned, a slow, predatory smile spreading across his face. "And you're a miracle. But we aren't alone." From the shadows above us, the sound of a dozen boots hit the top of the metal containers. We were surrounded. Chapter 4. The Predator's Price. The shipyard felt like a steel cage. Rain hammered against the corrugated metal of the shipping containers, creating a rhythmic, metallic roar that masked the sound of breathing, but not the scent. The air was thick with the smell of wet asphalt, salt water, and the sharp, aggressive musk of the iron pack. Cole stepped closer to me, his presence a warm anchor in the cold downpour. He didn't look afraid. He looked like he was finally in his element. 12 of them, Cole whispered, his eyes scanning the tops of the containers. "They're young, hungry, and stupid. They think numbers can take down a king." "Can they?" I asked, gripping the handlebars of my bike, ready to use it as a weapon if I had to. "Not tonight," he replied. He reached out, his hand cupping the back of my neck. His thumb traced the line of my jaw, and despite the cold rain, I felt like I was burning up. "Stay close. If I tell you to run, you ignore me. You stay behind me, and you keep moving." "I don't take orders, Cole," I reminded him, though I didn't pull away. "It's not an order, Beatrice. It's a plea." Before I could respond, the first of them dropped. A massive wolf, mid-shift, landed on the roof of Cole's SUV with a crash that shattered the sunroof. 2 more landed on either side of us. They didn't have Cole's grace. They were jagged, ugly versions of the shifter form, their eyes wide with a drug-like frenzy. Cole moved. He didn't wait for them to attack. He lunged at the nearest one, his shoulder connecting with the wolf's chest, with the sound of a sledgehammer hitting a brick wall. He was a whirlwind of calculated violence. No magic, no glowing auras, just the terrifying efficiency of a man who had spent a lifetime at the top of the food chain. I wasn't a spectator. One of the wolves, a wiry guy with yellowed teeth, lunged for my bike. I didn't hesitate. I popped the clutch and revved the engine, the back tire spinning and kicking up a spray of gravel and mud directly into his face. As he hissed and wiped his eyes, I swung the heavy bike around, the metal frame catching him in the shins. He went down, and I didn't wait for him to get up. I grabbed a heavy shipping hook from a nearby crate and swung. "Nice move," Cole called out, dodging a swipe from the lead attacker. He grabbed the attacker's arm, he snapped it with a sickening pop, and tossed him aside like trash. But for every one Cole took down, 2 more seemed to emerge from the darkness. The iron pack was using their numbers to wear him out. I could see the fatigue starting to show in the way his shoulders hunched, the way his breath was coming in ragged gasps. "Cole! Behind you!" I screamed. A wolf had climbed the container directly above him and was diving with a jagged piece of scrap metal in his hand. Cole turned, but he was a split second too slow. The metal caught him across the shoulder, slicing through his shirt and deep into the muscle. He roared, a sound that was pure, unbridled animal, and swiped the wolf out of the air, slamming him into the ground with enough force to crack the pavement. "You're bleeding!" I ran to him, ignoring the danger. "I'm fine," he growled, to clutching his shoulder. The blood was dark and thick, staining his white shirt a deep crimson. The remaining wolves circled us, sensing a kill. The leader, the one with the scarred throat from the shop, stepped forward. He wasn't shifted, but his eyes were yellow and slit-pupiled. "The king is bleeding for a human," the leader mocked. "Look at you. Pathetic. Give us the girl, and maybe we'll let you crawl back to your throne to die." Cole straightened up, pulling me flush against his side. Even injured, he felt like an immovable force. "You'll have to tear her from my cold, dead hands," he snarled. "And even then I'll hunt you from the grave." The leader laughed and signaled the final charge. "Hold on to me," Cole whispered in my ear. "What?" He didn't answer. He scooped me up in his uninjured arm, my back against his chest, and ran. Not toward the exit, but toward the edge of the pier. "Cole, what are you doing?" "Trust me, Beatrice." He hit the edge of the pier at a full sprint. Behind us, the wolves were screaming in rage. Cole didn't hesitate. He leaped. For a second, we were weightless, suspended over the dark, churning water of the harbor. The rain felt like needles against my face. Then, the world went cold and black as we hit the water. The current was strong, pulling at us, but Cole's grip was like iron. He kicked hard, dragging us toward the underside of a massive docked cargo ship. We surfaced in a pocket of air beneath the pier, hidden by the shadows and the heavy wooden pilings. We clung to a moss-covered pylon, gasping for air. The sound of the wolves' footsteps echoed on the wood above us, their frustrated howls muffled by the crashing waves. We made it," I panted, my hair plastered to my face. I looked at Cole. He was pale, his head resting against the pylon. The water around him was beginning to turn a dark, murky red. "Cole?" I reached for him, my hand slipping on his wet, bloody shoulder. His eyes fluttered, his grip on the pylon loosening. "Beatrice," he whispered, his voice barely audible over the water. Don't let go." His eyes closed and his body went limp, sliding into the dark water. Chapter 5. The Weight of a King. His weight was the first thing that hit me, literally. Cole Vane wasn't just a man. He was a dense mass of muscle and bone that felt twice as heavy now that he was unconscious. As his fingers slipped from the mossy piling, I lunged, wrapping my arm around his chest and slamming my back against the wood. The cold harbor water surged around us, trying to suck him under, trying to take the Alpha King down into the silt and the dark. "No, you don't," I hissed through gritted teeth, the salt water stinging my eyes. "You don't get to die on me in a sewer, Cole. Wake up." He didn't wake up. His head fell back against my shoulder, his breathing shallow and ragged. Above us, the muffled thuds of the Iron Pack's boots continued. They were pacing the pier like caged animals, their frustrated growls vibrating through the timber. They knew we were down here, but the freezing, oily water was a deterrent even for them. I looked around frantically. We couldn't stay here. The tide was coming in, and Cole was losing too much blood. I spotted a rusted iron ladder about 20 feet away, leading up to a maintenance crawl space beneath a derelict warehouse. I took a deep breath. He hooked my arm tighter under his armpits and started to swim. Every stroke felt like my muscles were being shredded. The water was a leaden weight, and Cole was an anchor. My lungs burned, my vision blurring with the effort. But I didn't stop. I couldn't. This man had jumped off a pier to save me. I wasn't about to let him drown. I reached the ladder and hooked my legs around the bottom rung. With a primal scream of effort, I hauled Cole's upper body onto a small, slick wooden platform just above the waterline. I scrambled up after him, my boots slipping on the slime, and dragged him further into the shadows of the crawl space. It was cramped, smelling of salt and rot, but it was dry. I collapsed beside him, my chest heaving. "Cole," I whispered, shaking his shoulder. "Cole, talk to me." He groaned, his eyes fluttering open for a brief second. They were unfocused, the predatory gray replaced by a dull, pained haze. "Beatrice? I'm here. I've got you." I moved to his shoulder. The wound was deep, a jagged tear that had sliced through the meat of his deltoid. It wasn't just a cut. The metal he'd been hit with must have been rusted or coated in something foul. The edges were angry and dark. I ripped a long strip of fabric from the bottom of my grease-stained coveralls. It wasn't sterile, but it was all I had. I pressed it firmly against the wound. Cole let out a strangled hiss of pain, his hand flying up to catch my wrist. His grip was weak, but his skin was burning hot. The trucks, he rasped, his eyes locking onto mine with a sudden, desperate clarity. "They'll circle the harbor. They have trackers." "Let them track," I said, leaning in so our foreheads touched. "I know this shipyard better than they know their own names. There's an old dry dock 2 blocks east. My dad used to keep a safe room there for when the packs got rowdy." "Beatrice?" He reached up, his blood-stained fingers brushing my cheek. "Why are you doing this? You rejected me." I looked at him. Really looked at him. The king was gone? There was just a man, bleeding and vulnerable, who had looked at me and seen something more than a mechanic. "I rejected the king, Cole," I murmured, my voice softening. "I haven't decided about the man yet. Now shut up and help me get you to your feet." I hauled him up, draped his uninjured arm over my shoulders, and began the agonizing trek through the dark, damp tunnels beneath the shipyard. Every step was a battle. Every sound of a distant siren or a barking dog made my heart stop. We reached the dry dock, a cavernous space filled with the ghosts of rusted tankers. I found the hidden door behind a stack of rotted pallets and shoved Cole inside. It was a small, windowless room with a cot, a first aid kit, and a bottle of high-proof whiskey. I lowered him onto the cot. He was shivering now, the shock setting in. I grabbed the whiskey, cracked the seal, and took a swig myself before pouring it over the wound. Cole roared, his body jerking, but I pinned him down with my weight. "Stay with me," I commanded. I began to stitch the wound with a curved needle and fishing line from the kit. I was a mechanic. I knew how to join things back together. But as I pulled the final knot tight, and the heavy metal door of the safe room began to rattle, not a knock, a systematic, rhythmic pounding. "Beatrice," a voice called out from the other side, smooth, cold, and utterly terrifying. It wasn't the Iron Pack leader. It was someone higher up. "I know he's in there, and I know he's dying. Open the door and I'll make your end quick." I looked at the door, then at Cole, who had finally drifted into a feverish sleep. I reached for the heavy iron crowbar leaning against the wall. Chapter 6. The Fever and the Flame. The pounding on the door stopped, replaced by a silence so profound it felt like a physical weight. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. I just stood there, my fingers wrapped so tightly around the iron crowbar that my hands had gone numb. Beside me, Cole was lost in the grip of a fever, his skin radiating a heat that felt like a furnace. "Beatrice," the voice came again, closer now, as if the speaker had pressed their lips against the steel. "He's a king. He's meant to burn out. You're just a girl who fixes bikes. Why die for a man who would eventually put you in a gilded cage?" "Because he's my project," I yelled back, my voice cracking but firm. "And I never leave a job unfinished." A low, chilling chuckle echoed through the door. Loyalty. How quaint. I'll give you 5 minutes to reconsider. After that, I stopped being polite. I turned back to Cole. He was tossing and turning, his brow drenched in sweat. I grabbed a rag, soaked it in the cold water from a small sink in the corner, and pressed it to his forehead. He groaned, his hand searching for mine in the dark. I let him take it. His grip was desperate, his fingers lacing through mine. "Beatrice," he muttered, his voice thick. "Run. Through the vent. It leads to the street." "Not happening, Cole," I whispered, sitting on the edge of the cot. I used my free hand to brush the damp hair from his eyes. "I'm not leaving you here to be some trophy for a power-hungry lapdog." His eyes snapped open, glowing a dim, hazy amber. He looked at me, and for a second, the Alpha King was back. He pulled my hand to his chest, right over his pounding heart. "If I don't make it," he rasped, "the pack, they'll come for you. Not as a mate, as a threat. You know too much. You've seen me. Like this." "Then you'd better make it," I snapped, though my eyes were stinging. "Because I'm not in the mood to be a fugitive." I watched him, the way his chest rose and fell in ragged hitches. The scent in the room was changing. The ozone and rain were still there, but beneath it was something sweeter, something more primal. It was the scent of a bond trying to knit itself together, even as I fought it. My own body was reacting to him, my pulse syncing with his, a strange warmth spreading through my limbs that had nothing to do with the heater in the corner. It wasn't magic. It was chemistry. It was the raw biological pull of two predators finding their match. "You're fighting it," Cole murmured, a ghost of a smile touching his lips. "Even now." "I'm a mechanic, Cole. I fight everything that doesn't work the way it's supposed to." Suddenly, the door didn't just rattle. It groaned. The hinges screamed as something immense began to push against the steel. The man outside wasn't waiting 5 minutes. He was a shifter, and he was using his raw strength to warp the frame. "He's coming in," I whispered, standing up and gripping the crowbar again. Cole struggled to sit up, his face contorted in pain. He reached for the bottle of whiskey on the floor, smashed it against the side of the cot, and held the jagged neck like a dagger. He was shaking, his wound bleeding through the stitches, but his gaze was lethal. "Stay behind me," he ordered, his voice regained some of its kingly authority. "In your dreams, Vane," I said, stepping up beside him. The door gave way with a thunderous bang, flying off its hinges and skidding across the concrete floor. A man stepped into the light, tall, lean, and dressed in a silver suit that looked like liquid metal. He had white blonde hair and eyes that were a cold, unnatural blue. "Cole," the man said, smoothing his tie, "you look terrible. And you," he turned his gaze to me, "must be the famous Rejection. I must say, his taste has improved. You have fire." "Who are you?" I demanded, leveling the crowbar at his chest. "I'm the one who should have been king," he replied, his shadow stretching across the floor as he stepped into the room. "And tonight, I'm the one who ends the dynasty." He didn't shift. He just moved. 1 second, he was 10 feet away, and the next, he was in front of Cole, his hand striking out like a snake. Chapter 7. The Alpha's Last Stand. The blonde man, Julian, I assumed, from the rumors I'd heard about Cole's exiled cousin, was faster than any shifter I'd ever seen. He didn't have Cole's brute strength, but he moved with a fluid, terrifying grace. Cole tried to lunge, but his injured shoulder gave way, and he stumbled. Julian laughed. It's a sharp, cold sound, and kicked Cole in the ribs, sending him crashing into the workbench. "Stop it!" I screamed, swinging the crowbar at Julian's head. He caught the iron bar with one hand. His strength was effortless. He looked at me, his blue eyes narrowing. "You have spirit, little mechanic. It's a shame it's wasted on a failing king." He twisted the bar, ripping it from my hands and tossing it across the room. He grabbed me by the throat, pinning me against the wall. His grip was like a vice, cutting off my air. I clawed at his hands, my boots kicking at his shins, but he didn't even flinch. "Beatrice!" Cole roared. I saw him rise. It wasn't the slow, painful struggle from before. It was something else. His eyes weren't just glowing, they were burning a deep, molten gold. The air in the room suddenly felt like it was charged with 1,000 volts of electricity. Cole didn't just shift, he exploded into motion. He tackled Julian, the force of the impact carrying them both out of the safe room and into the vast, dark, dry dock. I slumped to the floor, gasping for breath, before scrambling to my feet. I ran to the doorway. The dry dock was a battlefield. Cole and Julian were two blurs of shadow and silver, moving between the rusted hulls of ships. There was no magic, just the visceral sounds of a life-and-death struggle. The crack of timber, the denting of metal, and the raw, guttural roars of two alphas fighting for the crown. Cole was fighting for more than a crown, though. Every time Julian got close to the safe room, Cole would intercept him with a ferocity that was almost suicidal. He was using his body as a shield, protecting the doorway, protecting me. "Cole, look out!" I yelled as Julian grabbed a heavy steel cable and swung it like a whip. The cable caught Cole across his back, sending him sprawling into a pool of oily water. Julian stood over him, breathing hard, a look of triumph on his pale face. "It's over, Cole," Julian panted. "The Iron Pack is at the gates. Your city is mine." I looked around the room. I needed something more than a crowbar. My eyes landed on the old fuel lines running along the ceiling of the dry dock. They were ancient, likely still filled with residue. I climbed up a ladder near the door, my heart hammering. I found the main valve and yanked it. A stream of old, highly flammable diesel sprayed out, drenching the floor between Julian and Cole. I grabbed a flare from the wall, the kind used for emergency signaling. "Hey, Silversuit!" I screamed. Julian turned, his eyes widening as he saw me standing on the catwalk with the flare. "You want the city?" I shouted, my voice echoing through the dry dock. "Then you can have the fire!" I struck the flare. The bright orange spark illuminated the room. "Beatrice, no!" Cole yelled, trying to get to his feet. "Get back, Cole!" I warned. I looked at Julian. He was frozen, his gaze darting between me and the fuel on the floor. He knew he was fast, but he wasn't faster than an explosion. "You're crazy," Julian hissed. "I'm a mechanic," I replied with a grim smile. "I know exactly how much it takes to blow a gasket." I dropped the flare. The world turned into a wall of orange flame. The force of the blast knocked me backward off the catwalk. I felt myself falling, the heat searing my skin, until a pair of strong, familiar arms caught me midair. Cole held me against his chest as the fire roared behind us, cutting off the safe room and the dry dock from the rest of the shipyard. He looked down at me, his face covered in soot and blood, his amber eyes searching mine. You blew up your own shop," he panted, a look of disbelief and awe on his face. "It was a dry dock, not the shop," I corrected him, my voice trembling with adrenaline. "And it was an insurance write-off anyway." He laughed, a raw, beautiful sound, and pressed his forehead against mine. "I think I'm in love with a pyromaniac." "Don't get used to it," I whispered. But as the sirens began to wail in the distance, and the flames reflected in his eyes, I realized the hunt wasn't over. From the shadows beyond the fire, a dozen more pairs of glowing eyes appeared. The Iron Pack hadn't left, and they weren't alone. A sleek black helicopter descended from the smoke, its searchlight landing directly on us. Chapter 8. The Sky and the Scars. The searchlight was a blinding white eye, pinning us to the charred concrete like specimens on a board. The roar of the helicopter's rotors whipped the flames I'd just ignited into a frenzied, dancing wall of orange. Cole didn't put me down. His grip on me only tightened, his muscles corded and trembling with the effort of staying upright, while his body screamed from the deep gouge in his shoulder. "Beatrice, stay behind my heart," he rumbled, his voice vibrating against my ribs. "If you think I'm hiding while you're bleeding out..." "You've learned nothing in the last hour," I shouted over the mechanical thrum of the bird of Beatrice. The helicopter didn't have pack markings. It was sleek, matte black, and tactical. As it hovered barely 20 feet above the dry dock's roofless center, the side door slid open. I expected a machine gun. I expected a sniper. Instead, a heavy rope ladder dropped, followed by a man wearing a tactical headset and the sigil of the Royal Guard, Cole's personal elite. "The king is secure," the guard shouted into his comms. "Extraction in progress." "About damn time," I muttered, though my relief was short-lived. The glowing eyes in the shadows weren't waiting for an invitation. The Iron Pack rogues, driven by the desperation of their failing coup, lunged from the smoke. They didn't care about the helicopter, and they wanted the bounty on Cole's head, and they wanted it before the Royal Guard could touch down. Cole dropped me to my feet, his hand lingering on my waist for a fraction of a second. A silent check to ensure I was steady. "Go! Climb! Not without you!" He didn't argue. He shoved me toward the ladder just as 3 wolves tackled him from the side. I grabbed the rungs, the rough hemp biting into my palms, and started to climb. I looked down, my heart stopping, as I saw Cole buried under a pile of fur and teeth. He wasn't shifting. He was fighting as a man, using his fists and his raw, kingly weight to throw them off. I stopped halfway up, hanging over the edge of the fire. "Cole, move!" He threw a wolf off his back with a guttural roar, his eyes locking onto mine. With a burst of speed that shouldn't have been possible for a man with a hole in his shoulder, he leaped, catching the bottom rung of the ladder just as the pilot began to pull up. The world dropped away. We swung precariously over the burning shipyard, the heat of the fire licking at our boots before the cool night air took over. I climbed like a woman possessed, hauling myself into the bay of the helicopter. 2 guards reached out to grab me, but I swiped their hands away, leaning back out to grab Cole's hand. His fingers were slick with blood and rain, but his grip was a vice. I hauled him upward, the guards assisting, until he tumbled onto the metal floor beside me. The door hissed shut, cutting off the sound of the wind. The silence inside the cabin was deafening, broken only by the heavy, rhythmic panting of the Alpha King. "Oh, status?" Cole rasped, leaning his head against the bulkhead. "The city is in lockdown, sire," the lead guard reported, his face grim. "Julian's followers have taken the North Bridge. The packs are divided. They think you're dead." "Let them think it for another hour," Cole said, his gaze drifting to me. I was a mess. My coveralls were scorched, my face was streaked with soot, and my hands were raw. I sat on the floor opposite him, my legs shaking with the sudden drop in adrenaline. "You're a maniac," I whispered, wiping a smudge of grease from my forehead. Cole leaned forward, his amber eyes softening as they swept over me. He reached out, his hand trembling slightly as he tucked a stray, singed lock of hair behind my ear. And you are the fiercest creature I have ever had the privilege to hunt." "I told you," I said, though trying to regain my edge despite the warmth spreading through me. "I'm not a prize." "No," he murmured, his thumb brushing my lower lip. "You're the storm, and I think I've finally learned how to sail." The helicopter banked hard, the city lights below blurring into a sea of gold and white. I looked out the window, watching the shipyard fade into the distance. We were safe, for now. But as the lead guard whispered something into Cole's ear, the king's expression turned to ice. "What is it?" I asked, the hair on my neck standing up. Cole looked at me, his jaw tight. "The Iron Pack didn't just attack the shop, Beatrice. They found your records. They know about your sister." The air left my lungs. My sister, Clara. She was human. She had no idea about this world. "Where is she?" I demanded, my voice a ghost of a sound. They have her at the Zenith Tower," Cole said, his voice dropping to a dangerous, low frequency. "It's a trap, Beatrice. A public execution to draw us out." Chapter 9. The Zenith Shadow. The Zenith Tower was a needle of glass and steel that pierced the city's skyline, a monument to the Vane dynasty's wealth. Tonight, it looked like a tomb. As the helicopter hovered in the clouds a mile out, I stared at the blinking red light on the tower's spire. My stomach was in a knot that no wrench could loosen. "They won't hurt her," Cole said, his hand finding mine on the cold floor of the cabin. "Not until they have me. Clara is the bait, and I am the only fish they care about catching." "You're injured, Cole," I snapped, turning to face him. "You can barely stand, let alone storm a fortified skyscraper. If you go in there, you're walking into a slaughterhouse." "Then it's a good thing I'm not going in as a king," he replied. He looked at his head guard. "Give me the tactical vest. And the suppressors." "Cole, no." I stepped in front of him, my hands on his chest. "I'm the mechanic. I'm the one who knows how to bypass the security. If we go in loud, she dies. We go in through the vents. We go in through the bones of the building." Cole looked at me, his eyes searching mine. The alpha in him wanted to command me to stay in the sky, to keep me safe. But the man, the one who had watched me blow up a dry dock, knew better. "You have 20 minutes to get us to the penthouse," he said. After that, I stopped being subtle. The insertion was a blur. We rappelled onto the roof of the adjacent building and crossed the gap via a maintenance crane. No magic, just the sound of the wind howling between the towers and the metallic clank of our gear. I led the way, my small frame making it easier to navigate the tight service tunnels. Cole followed close behind. I could hear his labored breathing, the scent of his blood still fresh, but he didn't complain. He moved with the grim determination of a man who had already accepted his own end, as long as it bought mine. We reached the central junction on the 98th floor. I pulled a tablet from my belt, a tool I'd used 100 times to diagnose bike electronics, and patched it into the building's mainframe. My fingers flew over the screen. "I'm killing the floor sensors and the cameras," I whispered. "But the biometric locks on the penthouse are independent. I can't hack a heartbeat, Cole." "You won't have to," he said. He's stepping up to the heavy titanium doors. He didn't use a key. He didn't use a code. He placed his hand on the scanner, and the mark of the king, the biological signature in his DNA, did the work. The doors hissed open. The penthouse was a vast, open-plan nightmare of marble and glass. At the far end, silhouetted against the city lights, was a chair. My sister was tied to it, a gag over her mouth, her eyes wide with terror. Standing over her was the scarred wolf from the garage, the one Cole had supposedly broken. He wasn't alone. 6 others stood in a semicircle, their teeth bared, their bodies half-shifted into that grotesque midway form that favored raw killing power over speed. "Welcome home, Cole," the scarred wolf sneered. "Drop the gear or the girl's throat gets a new opening." Cole didn't hesitate. He unbuckled his tactical vest and let it thud to the floor. He tossed his sidearm aside. He stood there, vulnerable and bleeding, his hands raised. "Let her go," Cole commanded, his voice echoing through the marble hall. "You have the king. The human is irrelevant." "She's not irrelevant," the wolf laughed, stepping closer to Clara. "She's the reason you're kneeling, and I want to see the look in her eyes when I tear the heart out of her hero." I was still in the shadows of the doorway, my heart hammering. Cole hadn't mentioned me. He was playing the martyr. "Beatrice," Cole whispered, so low the wolves couldn't hear it over the wind whistling through the glass. "On my mark." He didn't look at me. He looked at the scarred wolf. "You think I'm kneeling?" Cole said, a dark, terrifying smile spreading across his face. "Yeah, I'm just getting closer to your throat." He lunged, but he didn't lunge at the wolves. He lunged at the floor-to-ceiling glass window behind them. Chapter 10. The Glass Horizon. The sound of the glass shattering was like a bomb going off. Cole hadn't used his fists. He'd used his entire body weight, fueled by a final, desperate surge of adrenaline. The reinforced pane didn't just crack. It disintegrated into a million crystalline shards that caught the city lights like falling diamonds. The sudden change in air pressure created a vacuum, a violent suction that pulled the curtains, the loose papers, and the smaller wolves toward the gaping hole 100 stories above the street. "Clara!" I screamed, breaking from the shadows. The scarred wolf was momentarily disoriented by the blast of wind. I didn't give him a second. I didn't have a gun, but I had the heavy, silver-weighted bola I'd fashioned from the bike chains in the garage. I swung it with a practiced motion, the heavy weights wrapping around his ankles and slamming him to the floor. I sprinted to my sister, my fingers fumbling with the knots. It's okay, I've got you," I sobbed, pulling the gag from her mouth. "Beatrice, what's happening? Who are these people?" Clara was hysterical, her voice lost in the roar of the wind. "Don't look! Just run for the door." I shoved her toward the exit where the royal guard should be arriving any second. I turned back to the center of the room. Cole was on the edge. Literally. He was grappling with the scarred wolf and 2 others right on the precipice of the shattered window. The wind was howling to a freezing gale that threatened to sweep them all into the abyss. Cole was fighting with a savagery I hadn't seen yet. No restraint, no kingly dignity. He was a beast protecting his own. He caught one wolf by the scruff and hurled him out into the empty air. The scream was cut short by the distance, but the scarred leader had a grip on Cole's injured shoulder, his claws digging deep into the fresh stitches. "If I go down, Vane, you're coming with me!" the wolf shrieked over the wind. Cole looked back at me. In that split second, the gold in his eyes faded, leaving only the gray of the man. It wasn't a look of defeat. It was a goodbye. "No!" I lunged forward, sliding across the marble. I grabbed Cole's belt just as the scarred wolf threw his weight backward, dragging them both over the edge. My boots hit the metal frame of the window. I was the only thing holding the Alpha King to the world. "Let go, Beatrice!" Cole shouted, his body dangling over the 100-story drop. "You can't hold us both!" "I am not losing another project," I growled, my muscles screaming, my fingers slipping on the leather of his belt. The scarred wolf was hanging onto Cole's legs, his dead weight pulling us all toward the grave. I looked down into the vertigo-inducing drop, the tiny cars, the streetlights like pinpricks. "Beatrice, listen to me," Cole said, his voice strangely calm amidst the chaos. "Look at me." I looked. His face was inches from mine, framed by the swirling night air. "You rejected the king," he whispered, a sad, beautiful smile on his lips. "But did you ever love the man?" My heart stopped. The answer was right there, written in the way I was refusing to let go, and in the way my soul felt tethered to his. "Yes," I choked out. "Yes, you idiot. Now pull yourself up." "Then survive," Cole said. He didn't wait for my answer. He used his free hand to reach up, not to grab the ledge, but to gently, firmly unbuckle his own belt. "Cole, no." He let go. I watched as he and the scarred wolf fell into the dark, two shadows tumbling through the neon-lit clouds. I screamed his name until my throat was raw, my hand reaching out for a man who was already gone. I slumped against the window frame, the wind whipping my hair, the cold finally reaching my bones. I was alone. The Alpha King was gone, and the city felt like a graveyard. But then, from the darkness below, a sound rose. It wasn't a scream. It wasn't the sound of an impact. It was a howl. A deep, resonant, and impossibly powerful sound that shook the very glass of the Zenith Tower. A sound that didn't belong to a man or even a normal wolf. I leaned out, my eyes searching the darkness. And there, clinging to the side of the building 50 floors down, was something massive, something silver. Chapter 11. The Silver Ghost. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. I scrambled to my feet, ignoring the searing pain in my forearms, and leaned precariously over the jagged edge of the broken window. 50 floors down, a massive shape clung to the side of the Zenith Tower. It wasn't a shadow. It was solid, glimmering faintly in the city lights. It was a wolf. But not just any wolf. Its fur was the color of polished steel, reflecting the neon glow like liquid mercury. This wasn't the grotesque half-shift of the Iron Pack, nor the sleek, natural form of a wild shifter. This was something else. Something ancient and impossibly powerful. It was Cole. He was massive, easily twice the size of a normal wolf, his claws digging into the high tensile steel of the tower's exterior. He clung to the building with a terrifying grip, the scarred wolf from the Iron Pack still clutched in his jaws. Cole didn't devour him. He simply held him, suspended over the dizzying drop, a silent, primal threat. Then, with a flick of his massive head, he flung the scarred wolf away like a discarded toy. The scream was swallowed by the wind. The silver wolf, Cole, began to climb, not with the frantic scrabbling of a desperate animal, but with a slow, deliberate power that defied gravity. He moved with an almost supernatural grace, his massive form flowing over the cold metal and glass. I could feel him now, not just with my eyes, but with a resonant thrum in my bones. It wasn't magic, not in the sense of spells or glowing auras. It was a raw, primal connection that bypassed my brain and went straight to the deepest parts of my being. My own inner wolf, usually a snarling, defiant presence, was now whimpering in awe. "Beatrice!" Clara's terrified voice snapped me back to reality. She was huddled by the door, surrounded by Cole's royal guards, who had finally arrived, their suppressed firearms trained on the empty space where the Iron Pack had been. "I'm here, Clara. I'm fine," I said, my voice trembling. I kept my eyes fixed on the climbing wolf. What was that?" Clara whispered, her face pale. That, I said, a strange mix of terror and triumph swelling in my chest, was Cole Vane, the king. The silver wolf reached the penthouse, its massive head appearing over the shattered edge of the window. It didn't look at the guards. It looked straight at me, its amber eyes piercing through the chaos. A low rumble, a satisfied growl echoed in the room. Then, with a final, fluid movement, it stepped over the threshold and began to shift back. It wasn't a quick, cinematic transformation. It was a painful, visceral contraction of muscle and bone. His silver fur receded, his frame shrinking, skin stretching, then snapping back into place. He groaned, a sound of profound effort, and stumbled forward, naked and bleeding, before collapsing onto the marble floor. His injured shoulder was a mangled mess. The stitches I'd put in were ripped open, and the flesh around it was black and swollen. He was breathing in shallow, ragged gasps, his skin clammy. "Get a medic!" I screamed, pushing past the stunned guards and rushing to his side. I knelt beside him, my hands flying over his skin, checking for more wounds. He was covered in scrapes and bruises, but the shoulder was the worst. It was infected, festering. "Beatrice," he choked, his hand reaching for mine. His touch was burning. The others, they're still out there. The Iron Pack. And Julian. "Forget them," I snapped, ignoring the royal guard, who were finally surrounding him, their faces a mixture of relief and fear. "You're dying, you idiot. What was that? How did you—" "The silver wolf," he whispered, his eyes closing in pain. "It's a vain secret, a last resort, a hidden strength that drains me dry." "It nearly drained you dead," I retorted, tears pricking at my eyes. I pushed the guards away. "You get a med kit, now, and get him out of here." I looked at the chaos around me, the shattered glass, the terrified guards, the lingering scent of smoke and blood. I looked at Cole, this king who had chosen me, rejected me, hunted me, and now had bled for me. And then I looked at my sister, Clara, who was now staring at me with a horrified understanding. Our worlds had just collided, and the fallout was going to be cataclysmic. Cole, barely conscious, reached up and cupped my cheek. "You didn't let go." "Never," I whispered, holding his hand against my face, trying to absorb some of the raw power that was now flickering and fading within him. "Not again." The lead guard, a grizzled alpha named Thorn, cleared his throat. "We need to move the king, and you, Beatrice. We need to talk." I looked from Cole's fading golden eyes to Thorn's grim face. My sister was safe, but the cost was a hole in Cole's chest and an even bigger hole in my carefully constructed life. The hunt might be over, but the war for my heart had just begun, and I had a feeling the biggest battle was yet to come. Chapter 12. The Fallout and the Healer. The emergency room was unlike any I'd ever seen. Not a hospital, but a sterile, high-tech medical wing hidden beneath Cole's mountain fortress. It was all cold steel, humming machines, and the scent of antiseptics trying to mask the underlying musk of frightened wolves. They laid Cole on a stark white table, his body covered in sensors and IV lines. "His core temperature is dangerously low, and the infection is spreading rapidly," a frantic medic reported, her hands flying over a complex console. The strain of the silver wolf shift pushed his body to its absolute limit. I stood over him, my hands hovering, useless. "What can I do?" I asked, my voice raw. "Stay out of the way, Beatrice," Thorn said, his voice clipped. He was supervising the medical team, his face grim. "This is not your fight anymore." "He just bled half his body weight protecting my sister and me," I retorted, rounding on him. It's absolutely my fight. You're a human, Thorn growled, his eyes flashing. A human who rejected him. You don't understand the power you wield or the danger you've put us all in. I understand that he's dying, and you're all just standing here looking worried. I slammed my hand on a nearby console, making the medics jump. What do you need? Blood? A spell? Just tell me. There are no spells, Beatrice, Thorn said, rubbing his temples. This isn't ancient history. The silver wolf is a biological anomaly, a dormant gene in the Vane lineage. It gives immense power, but it consumes the host. It needs to be purged, but his body is too weak for the traditional methods. I looked at Cole. He was ghostly pale, his breath rattling in his chest. I remembered the heat of his skin, the tremor in his touch, the way his body had responded to mine, even as I fought it, the raw, primal current that had passed between us. No, I whispered. It's not just consuming him. It's also trying to heal him. Thorn frowned. What are you talking about? The mate bond, I said, my gaze fixed on Cole. When he grabbed my hand in the safe room, when we were on the catwalk, there was a feedback loop, a pulse. It wasn't just him drawing from me, it was also connection. He was subconsciously trying to anchor to something stable, something human. That's impossible, a medic scoffed. The mate bond is strongest when two wolves are... Shifters aren't machines, but they follow rules of energy, I interrupted, my mechanic's brain kicking into overdrive. His body is overloaded. It's trying to burn out the infection, but it's tearing him apart. What if he needs a consistent, stable energy source, a constant anchor that isn't pulling against him? What are you suggesting? Thorn asked, his voice wary. I'm suggesting, I said, taking a deep breath and walking to Cole's side, that you leave the king to the mechanic and get out of my way. I gently pushed aside the IV lines and sensors. I climbed onto the sterile table, so straddling Cole's unconscious form. His body was burning hot, but my own skin felt like it was humming in response. I leaned down, pressing my ear to his chest, listening to the erratic thump of his heart. Then I did something I had sworn I would never do again. I reached out and took his hand. I laced my fingers through his, felt the rough calluses of his alpha skin against mine. I closed my eyes, focusing not on the fear, but on the raw, undeniable current that ran between us. I pressed my forehead to his, mirroring the intimate gesture from the safe room. I breathed, and I let my own inner wolf, the one that had whimpered in awe at the silver wolf, reach out. Not to dominate, not to submit, but to anchor. It was like plugging into a failing engine. My own energy, my own life force, began to flow into him. It wasn't magic, just a deep, visceral feedback loop of two beings finding equilibrium. I felt the infection fighting back, felt the chill of the fever trying to consume him. But I held on. I became his ground, his mechanic, his impossible mate. His vitals are stabilizing, a medic exclaimed, her voice filled with disbelief. Core temperature rising, infection markers. They're dropping. Thorn looked at me, his eyes wide with a dawning awe. You're healing him, he whispered. I didn't answer. I just kept my eyes closed, my breath coming in deep, even waves, willing my strength into the man beneath me. I was pouring myself into him, emptying myself for the Alpha King. It felt terrifying. It felt right. But as Cole's breath deepened and his fever began to break, a new sensation bloomed in my own chest. A warmth that wasn't just shared, but reciprocal. A fierce, possessive pull that had nothing to do with saving his life and everything to do with claiming it. His hand tightened around mine, even in sleep. I opened my eyes. Cole was still unconscious, but a faint, almost imperceptible silver glow emanated from his injured shoulder. It wasn't magical. It was the raw, concentrated power of two lives intertwining. The Alpha King was healing, but he wasn't healing alone. And I wasn't sure if I was saving him or if he was finally, irrevocably, claiming me. Chapter 13. The Alpha's Awakening. The hum of the machines was the first sound to truly register as I drifted back to full consciousness. My muscles ached, not with the familiar soreness of a long day in the garage, but with a deep, bone-weary exhaustion. I opened my eyes, expecting the familiar ceiling of my safe room. Instead, I saw a sterile white panel. I was still draped over Cole. My head was resting on his chest, and his arm was wrapped loosely around my waist, holding me in place. His scent, ozone, rain, and now something else, something subtly sweet and fiercely potent, enveloped me. His skin was no longer burning with fever. It was warm, vibrant. He was awake. I felt his chest rise and fall in a steady, powerful rhythm. His fingers twitched, tightening around my side. I held my breath, not moving. Part of me wanted to leap off the table, to put 100 miles between us and reclaim my independence. Another part, the traitorous part that had poured its very essence into him, wanted to stay there forever. "Beatrice," he murmured, his voice a low rumble against my ear. It was rough, but strong. "You didn't let go." I pushed myself up. Slowly, trying to maintain some semblance of cool. I sat up on the table beside him, pulling my legs up to my chest. He turned his head, his amber eyes clear, sharp, and focused entirely on me. "You were dying," I stated, my voice a little hoarse, "and I don't leave a project half finished." A slow smile spread across his face, a truly terrifying sight on a man like him. "A project, huh? Is that what I am to you?" "You're a high-maintenance engine with a tendency to ove Beatrice," I retorted, trying to sound sarcastic, but my heart was doing a frantic dance. "And you owe me a new dry dock." He reached out, his uninjured hand cupping my cheek. His touch was gentle, possessive. "I owe you everything, Beatrice Vance." The intensity in his gaze was overwhelming. It wasn't just gratitude. It was hunger. It was something deeper, something that felt like destiny but tasted like raw, undeniable truth. "The mate bond," he whispered, his thumb stroking my skin. "It's different now, stronger. You didn't just heal me, Beatrice. You forged something new, something unbreakable." "I just plugged in the right wires," I mumbled, trying to pull away, but his eyes held me captive. "No," he said, his voice dropping to a low, seductive growl. "You gave me your fire, and now I burn for you, little mechanic." He shifted, slowly, carefully, sitting up beside me on the table. He was still naked, his powerful body scarred but undeniably vital. The bandage on his shoulder was pristine, indicating the medical team had been in while I slept. But the way he moved, the way he looked at me, was all him. "The city is in chaos," he said, his voice hardening as he remembered his duties. Julian has used my presumed death to rally the rogues. My own alphas are wavering. I need to move." "You're still injured," I countered, looking at the fresh bandage. "And I'm exhausted." "I know," he said, his gaze softening again. He reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair from my face. "Which is why I need you, Beatrice. Not as a mate to be protected, as a partner, to fix my city just like you fixed me." He rose from the table, his presence filling the sterile room with a sudden, potent masculinity. He walked to a rack of clothes, pulling on a fresh pair of tactical trousers and a dark, long-sleeved shirt that stretched taut across his broad shoulders. He moved with a new kind of power, a contained energy that felt even more dangerous than before. "The iron pack is still out there. Julian will make his move tonight," he said, he buckling a heavy belt around his waist. "He'll expect me to be weak. He'll expect me to mourn. He won't expect me to bring the storm." He turned back to me, his eyes blazing. "Are you with me, Beatrice Vance? Are you ready to show them what happens when you try to break the king's mechanic?" My heart was pounding. This wasn't just about saving him anymore. This was about claiming my place by his side, not as a submissive mate, but as an equal force. I looked down at my grease-stained hands, then at the fierce, unyielding man before me. "Just tell me what needs fixing, King," I said, a dangerous smile touching my lips. "And don't get in my way." He grinned, a flash of white teeth that promised chaos. He walked back to me, pulled me off the table, and for the first time, he kissed me. It wasn't gentle. It was possessive, demanding, a raw, a primal expression of everything we'd fought against and everything we'd found. My hands came up, not to push him away, but to cling to his shoulders, pulling him closer. When he finally broke the kiss, we were both breathless. "Get dressed," he murmured, his voice husky. "We have a city to reclaim, and a rival to put down." He turned to leave the room, but stopped at the door, his gaze landing on me. "And Beatrice?" he said, a glint in his eye. "About that dry dock. I'll buy you a whole new shipyard." I just laughed, a sound of pure, exhilarating defiance. But as I walked to the clothes he'd laid out for me, sleek, dark, and surprisingly comfortable, I realized the true conflict wasn't over. He was healing. He was ready to fight. But the possessive look in his eyes, the undeniable pull between us, he told me that even if we won the war for the city, the battle for my fiercely independent heart was far from decided. Chapter 14. The Training Ground. The kiss still tasted like adrenaline and salt, a ghost of a sensation that made my skin hum even as I pulled on the tactical gear Cole had provided. It wasn't silk or lace. It was high tensile, matte black weave designed for movement. I felt like a shadow as I stepped into the fortress's subterranean training hall. The air here was cool and smelled of ozone, far removed from the grease and gasoline of my garage. Cole was already there, his back to me. He was shirtless, the bandage on his shoulder stark against his bronze skin. He was moving through a series of fluid, punishing strikes against a heavy sandbag. Every blow landed with the sound of a gunshot. He wasn't just training. He was recalibrating his body after the Silver Wolf shift. "You move like you're trying to break the world," I said, leaning against a weapon rack. He stopped, his chest heaving, sweat glistening on his muscles. He turned, his amber eyes scanning me in the new gear. A slow, dark, predatory smile spread across his face. "In this city, Beatrice, if you don't break the world, it breaks you. Come here." I didn't hesitate. I stepped onto the padded mat. "I don't need a lesson in how to punch, Cole. I've been holding my own in the shipyard since I was 12. "I know you can fight," he murmured, closing the distance until I had to tilt my head back to look at him. "But you've never fought an alpha, not a true alpha. Julian doesn't fight like a street brawler. He fights with the weight of centuries behind him. He'll try to use your biology against you. He'll try to make you freeze." "Try being the key word," I countered, lifting my chin. "Spar with me," he challenged. "No holding back. Show me the mechanic's grip. I lunged. I was faster than he expected. I went low, aiming for his sweep, but he moved with a liquid grace that shouldn't have been possible for a man his size. He caught my wrist, pulling me into his space. I used his momentum to spin, my elbow aiming for his ribs. He blocked it with his forearm, the impact vibrating up my arm. We danced. It wasn't the clumsy flailing of an amateur. It was a conversation of movement. He was testing my reflexes, pushing me to my limit. Every time I thought I had an opening, he was there, a wall of heat and muscle. But I wasn't yielding. I used the environment, tripping him with a training dummy. You using my smaller size to slip under his guard. Good, he panted, his hand catching my waist as we tumbled to the mat. I was pinned beneath him, his weight a heavy, grounding presence. Our breathing was synchronized, a frantic, jagged rhythm. The mate pull I'd been fighting was no longer a whine in the back of my mind. It was a roar. My body wanted to surrender, to let him claim the victory. But my mind was a fortress. You're fighting the bond more than you're fighting me, Cole whispered, his face inches from mine. His scent was overwhelming, musk, rain, and the metallic tang of sweat. I don't like things I can't control, I breathed. Control is an illusion, Beatrice. There is only the hunt. He leaned down, his lips brushing my ear. And right now, I'm not sure who's hunting whom. He let me up, his hand lingering on my arm. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. We weren't just preparing for a war against Julian, we were navigating the fallout of what we'd become. Thorne has the intel, Cole said, his voice returning to a professional clip as he pulled on a shirt. Julian is holding a coronation at the old cathedral tonight. He's invited the pack leaders to witness his ascension. He thinks he's won. Then he's a bad strategist, I said, wiping sweat from my brow. Because he forgot to account for the girl with the wrench. Tonight, we aren't just taking back the city, Cole said, his eyes turning a lethal molten gold. We're ending the Iron Pack. But Beatrice, if it gets ugly, you stay with the guard. Not a chance, King. I'm the one who knows how to drop the cathedral's electrical grid. The alarm on Cole's comms blared. Thorne's voice came through, frantic. Sire, we have a breach. It's not Julian. It's a message. One of the guard just walked in the front gate, or what's left of him. Cole and I ran for the command center. On the monitors, a lone figure stood in the fortress courtyard, surrounded by fallen royal guards. The man wasn't Julian. He was massive, covered in scars, and held a severed head in his hand. The butcher, Cole hissed, his jaw clenching so hard I thought it would shatter. Julian didn't just rally the rogues. He hired the mercenaries from the outlands. The man on the screen looked directly into the camera and began to speak, his voice a distorted rasp. The king is dead. Long live the chaos. We're coming for the girl next. Chapter 15. The Midnight Raid. And the butcher's message was still echoing in the cold air of the command center when Cole turned to Thorne. Assemble the strike team. We don't wait for the cathedral. We hit their staging ground at the docks, now. Sire, it's a trap, Thorne argued. They want you out in the open. Then give them what they want, I interrupted, my fingers already flying over a blueprint of the shipyard. I knew better than my own name. They're at Warehouse 14. It's the only one with an independent power source and enough clearance for their trucks. But the ventilation system is a mess. I can flood the floor with nitrogen from the cooling tanks. It won't kill them, but it'll slow them down. A wolf's lungs can't handle pure nitrogen any better than a human's. Cole looked at the map, then at me. There was no hesitation this time. Do it. Thorn, you take the perimeter. Beatrice and I go in through the roof. The night was a void as we approached the docks in a silent, low-altitude transport. No lights, no magic, just the hum of the engine and the weight of the task ahead. When we dropped onto the corrugated roof of Warehouse 14, the sound of my boots on the metal felt like a thunderclap. I moved to the pressure valves, my tools out. "Give me 2 minutes," I whispered. Cole stood guard, his body a silent, lethal shadow. He wasn't using a weapon. He didn't need one. His hands were curled into fists, his eyes scanning the darkness with the terrifying focus of a predator. I turned the valve. A low hiss filled the air as the nitrogen began to pour into the warehouse below. Through the skylight, I saw the mercenaries, massive, scarred men and women, suddenly staggering, clutching their throats as the oxygen was displaced. "Now," Cole said. He smashed through the skylight, a literal bolt from the blue. I followed him, rappelling down a service line. The warehouse was a maze of shipping crates and tactical gear. Cole was a blur of violence. He didn't shift, but he didn't have to. He moved with the strength of 10 men, throwing mercenaries into steel pillars and catching strikes with his bare hands. I stayed low, using my height to navigate under the crates. I wasn't there to brawl. I was there to dismantle. I reached the main communications hub, a jury-rigged setup they were using to coordinate the citywide riots. I jammed a screwdriver into the motherboard and poured a bottle of industrial solvent over the wires. "Comms down," I yelled. A mercenary, a woman with a jagged scar across her eye, lunged at me from behind a crate. She was twice my size, her teeth bared in a snarl. She didn't have a weapon, just claws. I ducked her first swipe, the wind of it whistling past my ear. I didn't panic. I used her momentum, grabbing her wrist and twisting, using a pressure point Cole had shown me on the mat. She gasped as her arm went numb, and I followed up with a kick to her knee. As she went down, I didn't finish her. I didn't have to. Cole was there, his hand catching her by the throat and tossing her aside like a rag doll. "You're getting better," he grunted, his eyes never leaving the shadows. "I'm a quick study," I replied. We pushed toward the back of the warehouse, where the butcher was supposed to be. But the room was empty. Only a single laptop sat on a crate, its screen glowing in the dark. I stepped forward, my brow furrowing. "It's a ghost haunt. They aren't here." The laptop screen flickered to life. It wasn't the butcher. It was Julian, sitting in a plush leather chair in a room that looked suspiciously like the Vane Palace. "Cole," Julian said, his voice smooth and dripping with venom. "Thank you for clearing out the docks. It made it so much easier for my men to enter the palace through the service tunnels you so graciously left unguarded while you were playing hero in the dirt." My heart stopped. Clara. I'd left her at the fortress, but the palace was the heart of the territory. If the palace fell, the city fell. "And Beatrice," Julian continued, leaning into the camera, "you really should have stayed a mechanic. You've made this so much more personal than it needed to be." The warehouse doors slammed shut. From the crates, a dozen red dots appeared on Cole's chest. Snipers. Chapter 16. The Rooftop War. "Don't move!" the voice boomed from the rafters. It was the butcher. He stepped out onto a metal gantry above us, a high-powered rifle slung over his shoulder, but he didn't need it. The snipers had us pinned. Cole didn't flinch. He didn't even look at the red dots on his chest. He looked at me. "Beatrice, when I say pressure, you drop." "Cole, there are 12 of them," I whispered, my heart hammering. "And they all work for money," Cole said, his voice rising, carrying through the warehouse. "Julian promised you a kingdom, didn't he? But Julian is a liar. He's a man who hides in palaces while you bleed in the dark." "Quiet, King," the butcher roared. "I am the one who pays the bills in this city," Cole continued, his voice steady, commanding. "I am the one who knows where the offshore accounts are hidden. Julian has already frozen your retainers. Check your phones." There was a split second of hesitation. In a world of mercenaries, loyalty is a line item on a budget. A few of the snipers shifted. It was the only opening Cole needed. "Pressure!" he roared. I hit the concrete floor just as Cole grabbed the nearest shipping crate and flipped it with a strength that defied human biology. It created a shield of splintering wood and steel. The warehouse erupted in gunfire. No magic, just the staccato rhythm of lead hitting metal. Cole didn't hide. He moved through the crossfire like a ghost, a blur of shadow. He reached the first sniper nest in seconds. I heard the crash of the gantry and the screams. I didn't stay down. I crawled toward the main power junction I'd spotted earlier. If I could blow the transformers, the snipers would be blind. I pulled a flare from my belt, the same kind I'd used at the dry dock, and jammed it into the wiring. "Close your eyes," I screamed. The explosion wasn't big, but the flash was blinding. The warehouse plunged into total darkness. This was Cole's territory. In the dark, a wolf doesn't need eyes. I heard the sounds of the hunt, the wet thuds, the snaps of bone, the terrified shouts of men who had realized they were locked in a room with a monster. I stayed still, my back against a crate, listening to the chaos. Then silence. "Beatrice?" Cole's voice was low, right beside me. "I'm here." He pulled me up. He was breathing hard, his shirt torn, but he looked exhilarated. "The butcher fled. He's heading for the palace. We have to move." We didn't take the transport. We took my bike, which Cole's team had recovered. I took the handlebars, Cole behind me, his arms wrapped around my waist. The city was a blur of neon and rain as we tore toward the palace. As we approached the gates, I saw the smoke. The palace wasn't just under siege. It was burning. Julian had decided that if he couldn't have the crown, he'd turn it to ash. We ditched the bike and ran through the garden, the roses crushed under our boots. We found Julian in the throne room. He was standing in front of the massive stone chair, holding a torch. My sister, Clara, was there too, not tied up this time, but held at knife point by the butcher. "You're late, cousin," Julian said, his eyes wild. "The city is already turning. The people want a leader who doesn't hide behind a mechanic." "Let her go, Julian," Cole said, his voice a low, lethal vibration. "This is between us." "It was always between us," Julian hissed. "But she made it interesting." He looked at me. "The girl who broke the king. I think I'll keep her as a pet after I kill you." Cole didn't roar. He didn't shift. He just walked forward, his eyes turning a deep, molten gold that seemed to illuminate the entire room. The air pressure dropped so sharply my ears popped. "You won't touch her," Cole said, "because you're going to be too busy dying." The butcher moved to slit Clara's throat. I didn't think. I threw my heavy wrench, the one I'd kept in my belt, with every ounce of strength I had. It caught the butcher in the temple. He staggered, and Clara broke free, running toward me. Julian dropped the torch. The tapestries caught fire instantly. "Final act, Cole!" Julian screamed, drawing a heavy silver blade. Chapter 17. The fever break. The throne room was a furnace. The heat from the burning tapestries was a physical wall, making the air shimmer and warp. Julian didn't look like a prince anymore. He looked like a madman. his silver blade reflecting the dancing flames. "You think you're better than me?" Julian shrieked, his voice cracking over the roar of the fire. "Because you found a mate in the trash? You're weak, Cole. You've traded your crown for grease and gears." Cole didn't answer. He didn't need to. He moved with a cold, terrifying precision. He sidestepped Julian's first wild swing, the silver blade whistling inches from his chest. Cole landed a blow to Julian's jaw that sent the blond man sprawling across the marble floor. "I didn't trade anything," Cole said, his voice calm amidst the chaos. "I found the only thing in this city that was real." I grabbed Clara, pulling her behind a massive stone pillar. "Stay here. Don't move." "Beatrice, we have to help him," Clara cried, her face smudged with soot. "I am helping him," I yelled back, eyes scanning the room. The fire was spreading to the wooden rafters. If the ceiling came down, we were all dead. I saw the fire suppression system's manual override on the far wall, but it was blocked by a falling beam. Julian scrambled to his feet, blood leaking from his mouth. He lunged again, this time aiming for Cole's injured shoulder. Cole caught Julian's wrist mid-air, the sound of bone straining under his grip echoing through the room. They were locked in a test of raw, shifter strength. No magic, just two apex predators trying to crush one another. "She will never love you," Julian gasped, his face turning purple as Cole squeezed. "She doesn't have to," Cole growled. "She just has to be herself." With a roar of effort, Cole threw Julian through the burning tapestries and into the stone wall. Julian slumped, unconscious or dead, as the wall of fire consumed the space where he fell. Cole turned to me, his clothes singed, his face covered in ash. He looked exhausted, the silver wolf power finally draining away. "Beatrice, the ceiling," I pointed up. The massive oak beams were groaning, glowing red. I ran for the override, jumping over the burning debris. I reached the lever and yanked it with everything I had. A deluge of chemically treated water erupted from the ceiling, a heavy, cold downpour that hissed as it hit the flames. The room was instantly filled with steam, blinding us. "Cole!" I screamed, lost in the white fog. I felt a pair of strong arms wrap around me, pulling me out of the steam and into the cool air of the hallway. Cole held me against his chest, his heart thumping like a drum against my ear. "I've got you," he panted. "I've got you both." We made it out to the balcony just as the throne room collapsed inward. The fire was out, replaced by a smoldering ruin. The royal guard were flooding the palace grounds, rounding up the last of the mercenaries. The coup was over. Cole leaned against the stone railing, looking out over the city. The sun was starting to peek over the horizon, painting the skyline in shades of bruised purple and gold. "It's over," he whispered. I stood beside him, my hand resting on the stone. I was covered in soot, my tactical gear was ruined, and my sister was traumatized. I should have felt relieved. I should have felt like running back to my garage and locking the door. But as Cole reached out and took my hand, his fingers lacing through mine, I felt a different kind of heat. It wasn't the fire of the palace. It was the slow, steady burn of a bond that had been forged in the wreckage. "You're a mess," I said, looking at his torn shirt and bruised face. "So are you," he replied, a tired, genuine smile touching his lips. He pulled me closer, his forehead resting against mine. "The city needs a king to rebuild it, Beatrice. But I think I need a mechanic more." "Don't get ahead of yourself, Vane," I said, though I didn't pull away. "I still haven't said yes." "You stayed," he whispered. "In the fire, in the dark. You stayed. That's enough for now." He leaned in, And this time, the kiss was slow, deep, and tasted like the end of a war. But then Cole stiffened. He pulled back, his eyes narrowing as he looked toward the palace gates. A black SUV, the same one the butcher had used, was idling there. The door opened, and a woman stepped out. She was tall, regal, and wore a crown of silver that matched the one Cole had discarded. "Mother?" Cole breathed, his voice filled with a sudden sharp dread. The Dowager Queen didn't look at her son. She looked at me, and her expression wasn't one of gratitude. Chapter 18. The King's Mechanic. The silence that followed the Dowager Queen's arrival was heavier than the smoke still curling from the throne room. Cole's hand tightened around mine, a reflexive, protective twitch that told me everything I needed to know about the woman standing by the gates. She didn't look like a mother, or she looked like an ice sculpture carved into the shape of an aristocrat. "Cole," she called out, her voice carrying across the charred gardens with the precision of a sniper's bullet. "I leave the territory for 1 week, and I return to find the palace in ruins and a girl who smells of petrol standing where a queen should be." Cole stepped forward, pulling me flush against his side. His exhaustion seemed to vanish, replaced by a cold, regal steel. "The palace can be rebuilt, Mother, and the girl is the only reason I'm standing here to tell you that." The Dowager Queen, Elena Vane, ascended the marble stairs with a slow, rhythmic click of her heels. She stopped 5 feet from us, her gaze raking over my soot-covered tactical gear and messy hair. "A mechanic, Cole? Truly? Our lineage survived the Great Purge and the Iron Wars. And you choose to anchor our bloodline to a commoner who handles a wrench better than a scepter?" I felt the familiar spark of rebellion ignite in my chest. I didn't need Cole to defend me. I stepped out from behind his shoulder, meeting her frost-blue eyes with my own. "With all due respect, Your Majesty," I said, my voice steady despite the adrenaline still humming in my veins. "Your bloodline was 5 minutes away from being extinct before I showed up. Your aristocrats were the ones setting the fires. I'm the one who put them out." Elena's eyes narrowed, a flash of predatory amber flickering in the depths. Fierce. I suppose that's what attracted him. But fire burns out, girl. Loyalty to the crown is a cold, eternal thing. You don't belong in this world. "You're right," I said, looking at the smoldering palace and then at Cole. "Yeah, I don't. I like things that are honest. I like machines that work when you put in the effort. Your world is broken, and quite frankly, I'm not sure I want the job of fixing it." Cole turned to me, his expression unreadable. For a moment, the weight of his crown seemed to pull at him. The city was watching. His mother was watching. The proper choice was to let me go back to my garage and find a mate who wouldn't scandalize the council. "She's right, Mother," Cole said, his voice dropping to a low, resonant frequency that silenced the wind. "She doesn't belong in your world, because I'm building a new one." He looked back at Elena, his jaw set. "The council is disbanded. The old laws of lineage are gone. From this day forward, the Vane territory is ruled by those who bleed for it, not those who are born to it." Elena looked at her son as if she didn't recognize him. "You would throw away 1,000 years of tradition for her?" "I'd throw away the whole world for her," Cole said. He didn't wait for her response. He turned back to me, ignoring the queen, the guards, and the smoldering ruins. He took both of my hands in his thumbs tracing the calluses on my palms. "Beatrice," he whispered, "I know you didn't ask for any of this. I know you just wanted to deliver a bike and get paid, but the hunt is over. I'm not chasing you anymore. I'm asking you to stay, not as a queen in a gilded cage, but as the woman who keeps me human. I looked at him, the scars, the soot, the raw vulnerability in his eyes. I thought about my garage, the quiet life I'd fought so hard for, and the smell of oil. Then I looked at the man who had jumped off a building just to keep me safe. "I have conditions," I said, a small, defiant smile tugging at the corner of my mouth. "Name them," he breathed. "I'm keeping my shop. I'm not wearing a crown. And if you ever try to give me an order again, I'm going to use that silver-weighted bola on your ankles." Cole laughed, a bright, genuine sound that seemed to chase the last of the shadows from the garden. He pulled me into a deep, crushing hug, burying his face in my neck. "Agreed." Clara came up beside us, looking tired but safe. She looked at the ruined palace and then at me. "So, does this mean I get a discount on my next oil change?" "In your dreams, Clara," I joked, though my eyes were wet. As the sun fully rose over the city, casting a warm, golden glow over the skyline, the hunt finally reached its end. The Alpha King had found his match, and the mechanic had found a heart worth fixing. We walked down the palace steps together, leaving the Dowager Queen and the ghosts of the old world behind. The city was a mess, and the future was a series of broken parts waiting to be assembled. But as Cole's hand found mine in the light of the new day, I knew we had all the tools we needed to build something that would last. The rejection was over. The partnership had just begun.
And that brings us to the end of Beatrice and Cole's journey, from a defiant rejection in a crowded ballroom to standing as equals amidst the ruins of a kingdom. They've proven that some bonds aren't just found, they're forged in fire. Thank you for joining us here at Z's Romance for this high-stakes hunt. If you enjoyed Beatrice's fierce independence and Cole's unwavering loyalty, make sure to give this video a like and subscribe to the channel. We're constantly bringing you new, grounded shifter stories that push the limits of the genre. Don't forget to head down to the comments and let us know your favorite moment from the story, and tell us where in the world you're listening from. We love seeing our community grow. Until the next story begins, stay fierce, and thanks for listening.